silent.
I didn't know that something bigger would happen.
Deadly.
The cost of living in paradise can be your life.
It's a good 15, 20 feet tall.
Inescapable walls of water.
The water just rose suddenly like somebody had pushed the center down. People were screaming.
Tsunamis carry with them literal waves of destruction and death.
Once a tsunami reaches land, then, all bets are off.
Most ravage the Pacific Ocean, but science is revealing they can occur anywhere and can combine elements to form rare and terrifying results. Incredibly, there are now methods we can use to reduce tsunamis' destructive powers. But there is still no way to stop them.
There is not a single coastline around the world where it is immune to tsunamis.
Hurricanes, tsunamis, earthquakes.
This was the deadliest tornado on record.
The impact can be devastating.
God completely wiped it off the map.
We step inside the disaster.
We were running for our lives.
It hits like a freight train.
And unravel the unexpected and sometimes jaw-dropping total impact.
Believe it or not, some good can come from these monster storms.
A volcano erupts off the coast of Indonesia, but it's nothing new in this part of the world.
West Java, for me, is all about its volcanoes. I've been seeing the volcano erupting many times before.
Indonesia, an archipelago of more than 17,000 islands, is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world.
I'm from North Norway, but I've been living in Indonesia for around 15 years. It's a special place. There's many volcanoes all around West Java, and the Krakatau volcano, it's my favorite one.
In December 2018, Øystein brings his family to the coast for a weekend vacation.
We arrived by car early midday and went straight down to the beach. I really wanted to show my family the volcano.
The Krakatoa archipelago is a series of small, uninhabited volcanic islands. Volcanic islands are formed as lava deep beneath the earth breaks the surface of the water. The largest island, Krakatoa, erupted in 1883, destroying 70% of the island and the archipelago.
Some people have described it as the biggest bang heard in recorded history. The waves from that eruption, the tsunami waves, were being recorded in England for about a week after the eruption. It basically set up the entire surface of the world's oceans into motion doing this for a week. It killed close to 36,000 people.
Anak Krakatau, or Child of Krakatoa, only emerged as a small volcanic island in 1927. Periodic eruptions have continued ever since, resulting in an average growth of almost 7 meters per year. And on a December afternoon in 2018, seeing the volcano erupt is nothing new to Øystein.
Krakatau had been erupting for around 6 months in the same way, and it looked like it was just an ordinary weekend.
But through the afternoon, Anak Krakatau seems to wake anew. Between noon and 6 p.m., there are 423 small eruptions, damaging local seismographic equipment. A level 2 danger warning is issued, telling people not to conduct activities within 2 kilometers of the volcano. While Øystein photographs Anak's spectacular eruptions, further along the coast, the Tanjung Lesung Resort is preparing for a big night. A private company is holding a party, and Indonesian pop band 17 is set to perform.
Aku sampai di Tanjung Lesung itu di jam 3 sore. Jadi itu pertama kalinya aku ke Tanjung Lesung. Aku suka di situ ya karena memang itu daerah wisata dengan pemandangan pantai yang bagus.
The organizers arranged for the stage to be set up on the beach. With high water levels from recent rains, a full moon rising, and clear skies, it's a beautiful and dramatic backdrop for the performance. Oyston, too, is enjoying the beautiful night.
It was a spectacular scene because the weather and the clarity was very good. After it got darker, you could see the red color of the lava being thrown to such heights that it ended up in the sea. I took a break around 7, and while eating dinner with my family, I would still hear the noise from the volcano in the background.
Sekitar jam 7 malam, jadi kami sudah mulai ngontrol, cek, memastikan bahwa semuanya berjalan dengan baik. Saya bertemu dengan tim entertainment yaitu Seventeen. Saya berbincang-bincang dengan vokalisnya, Mas Ivan, dan mereka langsung siap-siap untuk perform.
Ivan's wife, actress and aspiring political candidate Dilan, is there to watch her husband perform.
Jadi 2011 kenal Dilan, 5 tahun kemudian kita nikah. Dia panggil aku true love-nya, cinta sejati. Jadi suasana di sana seru banget. Ada sekitar 250 sampai 300 orang. Cuma memang cuaca di situ memang agak aneh sih. Harusnya windy banget gitu. Banyak angin di mana-mana. Tapi itu benar-benar nggak ada angin. Jadi itu berasa kayak di sebuah ruangan yang kosong. Yang nggak ada ventilasinya, nggak ada celah udaranya. Aku ngomong ke road manajerku, ini aneh banget nih. Kok bisa di pantai nggak ada angin gitu.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required. Download Vili now.
Despite his concerns, Ivan takes to the stage. After dinner, Oyston heads back to the water. It's the perfect opportunity to capture some pictures of Anak Krakatau as it lights up the night sky. But something is amiss.
I first noticed something strange, and I saw that there was no eruption anymore. And that in itself is not very weird, because sometimes volcanoes erupt and sometimes they stop. That's normal. But I could not see any glow from the lava. And my photos just showed like a black cloud over the volcano. Meanwhile, all the sky above it was clear. This was something I have never seen before. Suddenly I saw in the front of me that the sea was like coming up. I could see like it was like a wave or something coming towards me. And I thought, what is this? And then within like a second, I just knew that this wave is going to hit me if I don't run. So I grabbed the tripod and I just started to run inland.
Unbeknownst to Oyston, Anak Krakatau had erupted. It blows off the southwest side of the volcano. Over 64 hectares of land is sent hurtling into the ocean. The collapse triggers a tsunami. The eruption lasts for more than 2 minutes, producing an ash cloud 400 meters high. The volcano shrinks from 338 meters to just 110 meters.
Typically, earthquakes cause tsunamis because earthquakes cause the seafloor to move up or down. This motion of the seafloor gets transferred on the water surface, so a water wave is formed. This was a very, very different tsunami because apart as the volcano blew up, it triggered a flank collapse, which means a part of the volcano was actually pushed into the sea. Think of 200 football fields filled to about 300 feet high, a force equivalent to about 250,000 tons hitting the ocean in a fairly small area. That's generating a huge tsunami locally.
When a tsunami reaches the shoreline, the energy throughout the water column needs somewhere to go. This can translate into tall waves that can travel far inland.
The tsunami generated by the 22 December 2018 eruption of Krakatoa was huge. It reached about 150-foot height elevation, making it the largest tsunami that we know in recent times, generated by landslide.
Authorities in Indonesia detect the tsunami, but it's already too late for a warning. At Tanjung Lesung, the audience is enjoying the concert when the wave slams into the stage from behind. No one is expecting it. The band is swept away, and the wave plunges into the audience.
Teman-teman Seventeen, saudara aku di Seventeen itu masuk ke tengah, terus tiba-tiba kayak dipukul kepala, terus aku black out, pingsan.
As the tsunami wave from the Anak Krakatau eruption hits the coast, Indonesian pop singer Ivan is knocked unconscious and dragged into the ocean.
Jadi akhirnya aku bangun, karena aku harus nafas ya. Bangun lagi, terus ada beberapa kayu dan besi yang memang menghantam kepala aku gitu. Tuk, 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 gitu, karena itu banyak sekali barang. Sampai akhirnya aku bisa berenang ke permukaan. Tarik nafas yang dalam. Orang-orang di situ teriak tsunami. Jadi aku pikir ini kiamat atau mimpi nih gitu.
Witty is in the resort when he hears the commotion. There is no time to react.
Tahu-tahu ombak air laut itu sudah menabrak ruang meeting yang kira-kira tinggi air itu sekitar di atas 3 meter. Langsung lari ke arah pintu keluar. Saya mencoba lari keluar, refleks, tapi saya sudah tidak bisa lari. Saya kena terjangan ombak tsunami itu.
It's extremely difficult to survive a tsunami flood. This is why it's extremely important never to hesitate for even a few seconds to evacuate. If you recognize that the tsunami is about to happen, or if you hear a tsunami warning, evacuate immediately.
So after I ran inland and I saw the first wave of the tsunami, I were able to outrun it. And I was standing and just thinking, like, what was this? I immediately thought about my family, and then I could hear the sound of the ocean disappearing, and I knew that, well, something more is coming.
Tsunamis are rarely one wave. Tsunamis are usually a train of waves, and the second or the third wave are larger in the tsunami wave train.
While Oyston rushes to his family, Witty is caught in the first wave.
Saya ke bawah ombak kurang lebih 20 meter. Saya terselamatkan di belakang ruang meeting itu ada pohon besar. Saya pegang pohon. Ketika saya sadar di bawah pohon itu, semua lampu, electricity semua mati. Jadi kondisi gelap, tapi yang ada memang orang-orang minta tolong untuk dibantu. Jadi saya hanya berdoa supaya semuanya diselamatkan.
No one knows yet the magnitude of the disaster, but if it's anything like the Boxing Day tsunami of 2004, the fallout will be catastrophic. A 9.1 magnitude earthquake struck 240 kilometers off the coast of Indonesia. The ocean floor fractured.
A piece of land the size of California, close to about 800 miles long, moved up about 60 feet. That triggered a huge motion in the ocean.
The earthquake wasn't felt on land, and with no warning systems in place, people remained on the coasts, oblivious to the danger. 15 minutes later, the tsunami slammed into coastal Indonesia, waves as high as 30 meters. For over 7 hours, it surged into 14 different countries, flooding cities and wiping out entire villages. The energy released by the earthquake and tsunami was equivalent to over 1,500 times that of the Hiroshima atomic bomb.
The 2004 Boxing Day tsunami was unfortunately the deadliest tsunami we know of. It killed over 250,000 people. It was an international disaster. People from over 50 different countries in the world died in the Indian Ocean tsunami.
No country was hit harder than Indonesia. 170,000 people perished in the province of Aceh alone.
I think the biggest lesson that we've learned in the 2004 tsunami was to be prepared.
Following the 2004 tsunami, a detection system known as DART became fully operational across the Pacific. It employs a pressure recorder anchored to the seafloor and a surface buoy receiver transmitter.
As the tsunami passes by, a transducer sitting on the seafloor senses the change in pressure, sends a signal to the buoy, and then the buoy sends a signal to a satellite. And these buoys, first of all, confirm that the tsunami was generated, and second, tell us how big the tsunami wave is.
The DART system can provide enough of an early warning for tsunami events that initiate far offshore. But for those that occur very close to land, it's far less effective.
Right now, the best we can do for tsunamis that happen just offshore is 10 to 20 minutes. That's not good enough. In some cases, tsunamis arrive on the target coastline in less than 10 minutes. We really need to get down to reducing the warning time to 5 minutes or less.
Anak Krakatau is only 48 kilometers from the Tanjung resort on the Indonesian coast. When it erupts and collapses to create the tsunami of 2018, there is just no time for an early warning. Exactly 14 years after the Boxing Day tsunami, it's happening all over again. As the first wave retreats, Øystein makes it to his family.
I got into the room where my wife and kid were staying. I woke them up, and at this particular moment, the second wave that was larger than the first wave crashed into the hotel. The hotel was shaking, and you could hear that the water was flowing around it. And I looked out the window, and I could see that the wave had gone around the hotel. So it was quite a scary experience. I was just thinking was that I need to get my family and myself into safety.
As the threat of another wave looms, Ifan has already been swept out into the sea.
Itu jauh banget daratannya, itu udah jauh banget. Akhirnya aku dikumpulin sama mungkin sekitar 80-100 orang yang selagi panik dan saling tarik-menarik antara satu sama lain.
Their chances for survival are slim. At 30 centimeters, the force of moving water makes it difficult to walk. By 50 centimeters, even cars begin to float, but it's still possible to navigate through the water. But as water rises towards 70 centimeters, the chance of dying in a tsunami jumps to over 70%. The critical height factor, the knees. By 1 meter, the chance of dying is essentially 100%.
Once you get carried by the tsunami, it's extremely difficult to survive it. Tsunamis carry a lot of debris. It's like being in a concrete mixer with nails and 2x4s and piece of wood and stones. You get tumbled. And contrary to what most people think, people don't die from tsunamis because they drown. People die because of tsunamis because of puncture wounds, because they get thrown into hard surfaces, or they get hit by objects. Once the tsunami reaches land, then all bets are off. You don't have a chance.
For Ifan, that means fighting staggering odds.
Ada yang nyolok mataku gitu, ada yang ngejambak, ada yang nyekek gitu, karena mereka pun coba buat survive dengan cara yang menarik siapapun yang timbul gitu, karena nggak semua orang bisa berenang, apalagi di tengah laut, dan nggak semua orang nggak panik.
Ifan sees a table floating amongst the debris. It's a glimmer of hope if he can just stay afloat.
Aku coba bertahan di meja itu. Satu orang lagi datang, terus kita bertiga bertahan di meja itu tenggelam. Akhirnya tenggelam lagi. Di situ sebenarnya nafasku udah habis. Nafas dan tenagaku udah habis sih sebenarnya di situ.
As the water recedes from the second wave, Whitty climbs down from the tree. The possibility of yet another wave means he must act quickly.
Menyampaikan semua tamu karyawan yang ada di sekitar itu, saya minta tolong supaya dievakuasi semua tamu ke Cikadu namanya. Itu dataran lebih tinggi, tapi jarak cukup jauh, kurang lebih 5 kilo dari kita. Banyak sekali warga di situ kumpul, tapi mereka memang juga kondisi panik, bingung, karena tidak ada tanda-tanda, tidak ada peringatan, tidak ada sesuatu yang memang kejadian gempa tidak ada.
Tsunamis evolve so fast. They move way faster than hurricanes or tornadoes. So they come out of nowhere. A lot of people are caught completely unaware of what is happening. It's like a silent killer.
And for Ifan, it's a fight for survival.
Instingku sebagai manusia memang membuatku bertahan gitu. Karena aku juga bisa berenang, jadi aku coba berenang gitu.
Ifan comes across a black box floating in the ocean. It's a case for the band's lighting equipment. He grabs it and holds on for dear life.
Banyak mayat yang nyenggol-nyenggol badan. Banyak.
After the second wave retreats, Oyston and his family take their shot and run for the forest.
The only thing in my mind was to get onto higher ground. People were scared because we were wading through water, and some people had fell and had problems getting over the roads. It was a difficult position to be in, of course, especially since you're traveling with kids. When we arrived uphill, maybe around like 50, 100 meters above sea level, we tried to make a more calm setting for my 4-year-old son. And we were lucky because the people, the locals up there were very friendly, and we felt safe.
As the villagers open their homes to the evacuees, after clinging to the box for more than 2 hours, Ifan miraculously reaches the beach. He arrives to utter desolation.
Kondisinya di pinggir pantai waktu itu sepi ya, karena orang yang hidup semuanya berlari ke arah gunung, takut tsunami susulan. Jadi di pantai itu mungkin cuma ada 3 orang, aku ingat cuma ada 3 orang. 3 orang security yang megang center, di antara ratusan mayat, sepi. Tapi aku dijemput sama security 1 orang, terus aku dipapah gitu, dibawa ke pos satpam, security, terus aku dikasih minum. Di situ sempat pingsan, terus sempat muntah air laut sama pasir, sampai akhirnya aku dibawa ke klinik.
When Ifan regains consciousness, he has one thing on his mind. How are his family and friends?
Itu keajaiban buat aku masih hidup. Jadi apakah aku berdoa sih mereka semua masih hidup, tapi apakah mereka mendapatkan keajaiban yang sama aku, mendapatkan keberuntungan sama? Makanya aku kayak, ya Allah, kayaknya nih aku cuma sendiri nih yang masih hidup.
Morning breaks on the island of Java, Indonesia, following the shocking tsunami the evening before. As Anak Krakatau continues to erupt, daylight reveals the destruction along the coast. Eko owns a petting zoo and paintball center and was far inland when the tsunami struck. He had no idea what was happening until a friend texted him early the next morning. Having experienced the 2004 tsunami, he's shocked to hear it's happening again.
Pikiran pertama saya adalah tidak percaya ya bahwa karena memang early warning system atau peringatan dini tentang tsunami itu tadinya nggak ada informasi itu.
Eko and 4 of his employees join other rescuers at Tanjung Lesung and immediately get to work.
Di situ kita lakukan pencarian, ada beberapa jenazah memang yang berada di pinggir-pinggir pantai.
It's a terrible indication of the body count that will come. After miraculously surviving the tsunami, Ifan posts a heartbreaking video to his Instagram followers.
Kita kehilangan pas ban sama harus menuju kita rumah. Andi sama Oki harus menuju kita Oki. Andi sama Herman sama Ujang belum ketemu doanya. Doanya belum dari saya pasti ketemu.
It wasn't until in the afternoon that I dared to go back to the hotel alone to check our stuff and the car. My first impression when I arrived down at the coast was that a lot of infrastructure had been damaged, especially locals' houses and the boats. Cars were washed off the road. There was quite a lot of destruction, more than I actually had expected.
With his guests and staff safe, Whitty returns to the hotel to survey the damage.
Pada saat saya lihat hotel yang sudah begitu rusak parah itu, memang saya terus terang juga cukup shock ya. Jadi dampaknya itu seperti itu masih kelihatan, masih terlihat bahwa begitu dahsyatnya gelombang laut itu sampai bisa membawa material yang cukup besar seperti batu karang itu semua masuk ke daratan.
Both Whitty and Oyston recognize how fortunate they are.
Sampai saat ini.
Tragically, not everyone is so lucky.
Rasaku bertahan di sini.
For Ifan, 2 days of searching yield devastating results. All 3 of his bandmates and their manager have been found dead. His wife Dilan is still missing. He refuses to lose hope, but by the 3rd day of searching, the heartbreak deepens.
Jadi aku keep on searching selama 3 hari sampai akhirnya ketemu jenazah istri itu di rumah sakit. Sebenarnya itu momen yang sangat susah ya pada saat aku coba buat memahami keadaan di mana aku harus kehilangan teman-temanku dan juga istriku.
After days of searching, there are no more survivors. The only job is recovering bodies. Eiko and other volunteers continue to search through the rubble. When Eiko sees something strange, a huge sea turtle buried in the rubble, and it's still alive.
Saya tergerak. Ini penyu harus kembali nih, karena penyu itu adalah hewan yang dilindungi. Tetapi pada saat saya mau angkat penyu, tiba-tiba tim saya atau kru saya ada yang teriak, Mas, di sini ada penyu lagi. Nah ternyata daerah situ makin lama kita cari makin banyak penyu-penyu yang terjebak.
Washed far inland by the unexpected tsunami, the turtles are helpless amongst the rubble, facing certain death.
Saya nggak bisa membayangkan tuh kalau nggak ada yang menyelamatkan. Udah pasti mati aja. Karena dari segi posisi, dari segi berat tubuh ukuran, itu dia nggak akan bisa pindah kalau nggak dipindahkan atau dibantu oleh manusia atau orang.
Amongst the death and destruction, Eiko is determined to get the turtles back to the sea. He rallies his friends from the paintball center to help save the turtles.
Waktu saya angkat pun dia kakinya tuh masih terus mengepak-ngepak gitu, bergerak-gerak. Nah, saya coba bawa ke bibir pantai, dia begitu semangatnya untuk menuju ke laut. Wah, itu luar biasa tuh bagi saya tuh.
It's a ray of light for Eiko and his friends amongst the devastation.
Itu total sekitar 30 ekor yang berhasil kita pindahkan ke habitatnya.
More than a year after the tsunami, signs still remain, reminders of the power of nature.
Yeah, you feel quite small, and you always try to think, what can you do more? Because of course it was very scary. But then you realize that, well, you can do a lot of things, but you can never be 100% because, nature is unpredictable.
Banyak orang yang membuang-buang waktunya gitu. Banyak banget deh. Banyak banget. Kematian itu bisa datang kapanpun. Jadi itu yang gue pelajari.
For many, tsunamis are an all too real part of life. And for those who see the threat of tsunamis as a world away, there are strange phenomena scientists are just recently beginning to comprehend that can bring tsunamis right into your own backyard.
Unfortunately, there is not a single coastline around the world where it is immune to tsunamis.
A 3-meter swell of water suddenly overwhelms a pier in Montrose, Chicago. 8 people are swept to their deaths. Marvin was just 23 years old at the time.
I invited my father, his father, and a few of the neighbors to go out fishing. We were fishing, and just suddenly, I felt the boat move a little bit. I looked ashore, and the people that had been fishing off the sides are no longer there. They're in the water. The lake had come up probably 4 or 5 feet, just suddenly. People were screaming. You could hear people who were crying out, you know, they're terrified. But the water just rose suddenly like somebody had pushed the center down, allowing the sides to come up.
But the wave wasn't preceded by earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. In fact, the Great Lakes are fairly inactive geologically. Yet there's clear evidence that a tsunami-like wave did sweep on shore in 1954. But what could possibly have created a tsunami in an inland lake?
When we think of tsunamis, we generally think of seismic tsunamis. These are tsunamis that are created by an earthquake in the middle of the seafloor. When that earthquake happens, it displaces the water above it. That creates a wave or a series of waves that then propagate away from that source towards the coastline. Meteotsunamis, or meteorological tsunamis, are different. They're created by an atmospheric disturbance. The easiest way to think about this is to picture a thunderstorm or a squall line. As the storm goes across the surface of the water, if it's moving at just the right speed, it can efficiently transfer its energy from the atmosphere into the water and create a meteotsunami wave. Because of their origin, most of them are quite small, but with intense storms, they can grow quite large. In fact, we've measured meteotsunamis up to 3 meters in the Great Lakes.
The resultant waves can travel for kilometers, crash over barriers, and sweep inland with surprising force. Marvin Katz survived, but there were others who were not so lucky.
We saw a man floating out towards us, and he would go down, and he'd pop back up again, and he was still probably some distance from us, so we were able to haul anchor. I started the engine, and I was able to get the boat close to him. And fortunately, we were able to pluck him out of the water and get him on our boat. We were able to get to shore. There were about 8 people who died that day. Drowned, yeah.
These mysterious killer waves have been recorded around the world.
All the U.S. coastlines, in the Mediterranean and Adriatic Seas, in Australia, South China Sea, basically everywhere we look.
In the Great Lakes, there are about 100 every year. Though most are under 30 centimeters high, 1 in every 10 years is as devastating as the 1954 event. What the future holds for meteotsunamis is uncertain.
It's hard to say how climate change will affect meteotsunamis. More intense storms would bring higher wave heights. More frequent storms would bring more frequent meteotsunamis. Maybe the most critical piece is timing. Right now in the Great Lakes, peak meteotsunami timing seems to be about April to May. The peak recreational use, or beach-going time, is roughly June, July, and August. If we were to see warmer water temperatures that led to beachgoers coming earlier in the season, we might see an overlap between these two seasons, and that could increase the risk.
Predicting when and where these unstoppable waves will strike is an evolving science. But there are unique warning signs that must be heeded, especially when it comes to a rare tsunami that is probably the most terrifying.
So some people call this a fire tsunami.
In 1993, residents of a small island off the coast of Japan were shaken to their core by an unexpected natural disaster. A tsunami and a fire rolled together in one. Okushiri is normally a small slice of heaven off the coast of Japan. Local wine, fresh abalone, a relaxing hot spring, and blue waters. But this piece of heaven lies along the seismically active Ring of Fire. And on the night in question, an earthquake erupted.
A magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck in the sea of northern Japan, close to Okushiri Island. About 4 minutes after the earthquake, first tsunami wave hit the island.
That's when something even more unbelievable happened.
As the first tsunami wave partially came around the harbor, 5 fishing boats spontaneously burst into flames almost at the same time.
But that was just the beginning. A second tsunami wave pushed the boats to shore, spreading the fire into the city. The resulting inferno destroyed the town, taking 198 lives with it.
A lot of people used to think that because a tsunami is essentially a huge flood that comes in, you cannot have fires. In Okushiri, it not only flooded the town, but it caused a lot of fires. More than half of the town burned down. And this was an eye-opener because we didn't used to associate tsunamis with fires. So some people call this a fire tsunami.
But what had really happened? How could 5 fishing boats separately and spontaneously burst into flames just as the tsunami was entering the harbor? Eyewitnesses described foaming and bubbling water in the minutes before the fires flared up. This was a key warning sign sparking Yuji Enomoto's theory that begins further off the coast. He believed that methane trapped under the sea floor was released by the quake.
Methane-bearing bubbles would then carry seashore by tsunami-induced wind and ignited due to electrostatic charges generated when the bubbles hit the harbor wall.
Yuji conducted a lab experiment using seawater saturated with methane. He wanted to test if certain conditions could generate enough of an electrostatic charge to ignite the gas.
And we found that they did, and the methane would catch fire.
Methane trapped under bodies of water is a well-known phenomenon around the world. Unfortunately, for the residents of Okushiri Island, the seafloor methane, the location of the earthquake, and the characteristics of the harbor all combined to form the perfect conditions for a fire tsunami.
You had really the world's worst, soup of tsunami debris, fuel, propane tanks that were not secured on the ground, and you had these fires that burned for hours and hours after the earthquake.
But Okushiri wasn't an isolated incident of a fire tsunami. A single earthquake off the coast of Japan in 2011 resulted in numerous fire tsunamis along the coast.
In the city of Kesennuma, the city burned, for at least 12 hours after the tsunami struck.
Though it's not entirely certain what started the Kesennuma fire, the tsunami destroyed much in its path, including a tank leaking heavy oil. Gases and fuels mixing in the turbulent water could easily have triggered the explosions and extensive fires.
Tsunami fires, based on what we've seen in the last 50 years or so, happen once every 20 years. And because they're so deadly, we really need to be ready for them.
Though fire tsunamis are rare, that could change.
Global warming could increase methane emission from the ocean floor. There are significant quantity of methane buried in coastal regions around the world. So theoretically, a tsunami in any region of the world could trigger a tsunami in this area.
It's an amazing sight to see a flood, and at the same time that you see the flood, to see everything burning. Makes no sense, but it happens.
Can anything stop the cataclysmic effects of tsunamis rushing over the land and taking everything in their paths? Will modern technology save us, or could nature hold the answers? Tsunamis, meteotsunamis, fire tsunamis. The effects can be devastating, but is there anything that can be done to stop them or mitigate their deadly effects? In the Hambantota district of southern Sri Lanka, in the aftermath of the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami, some 6,000 people were killed. Seaside villages like Wandarupa were virtually wiped out. Entire homes swept away like matchsticks, families still inside. Fishing boats were destroyed, livelihoods gone. Nothing in the path of the tsunami stood a chance. But just 30 kilometers west, in the seaside village of Kapuanwala, only 2 people died in the tsunami. How could there have been such a vast difference between Kapuanwala and other coastal towns and villages? The answer appeared to be along the shoreline.
There were evidences that people who live behind mangroves are affected less than those who are in the open coastal areas.
Typically characterized by their elaborate root systems, there are some 55 species of true mangroves found in coastal waters around the world.
Mangroves grow in a very strange environment between saline or salty water and fresh water, but they manage to survive, even flourish there.
It turns out that prior to the 2011 tsunami, Kapuanwala had one of the healthiest and most abundant mangrove ecosystems in Sri Lanka. Many other coastal areas, including Wandarupa, had destroyed much of their mangrove forests for prawn farms, resorts, and other development. Researchers believe the decision to cut down the mangroves was ultimately the difference between life and death.
Mangroves can be incredibly effective to slow down small tsunamis.
In Kapuanwala, the intertwined root system of the mangroves had acted as a natural barrier to waves coming inland, not stopping, but reducing the effects of storm surge and flooding. Villagers could hear the waves hit the mangroves, slowing them down and giving residents time to run inland. Researchers have shown that a 100-meter belt of dense mangrove forest could reduce the energy of a tsunami by as much as 90%. Following the eruption of Anak Krakatau and tsunami of 2018 in Indonesia, Widi, the manager of the Tanjung Lesung resort, realized firsthand the benefit of trees to protect the shoreline.
Saya ke bawah ombak kurang lebih 20 meter. Saya terselamatkan di belakang ruang meeting itu ada pohon besar. Jadi yang kami lakukan saat ini beserta teman-teman, tolong kita harus banyak menanam pohon supaya ini juga membantu kita. Hampir di garis pantai yang kena dampak kemarin, itu kami sudah tanam beberapa jenis pohon yang memang tingkat ketahanan terhadap tekanan air laut itu kuat. Secara penataan bangunan, pemahaman soal evakuasi petunjuk-petunjuk arah, petunjuk untuk evakuasi, penanaman pohon-pohon. Karena kami lihat ternyata kejadian seperti tsunami yang begitu dahsyat, itu ternyata yang bisa menyelamatkan salah satunya juga alam.
Unfortunately, the mangrove ecosystem is one of the most threatened and quickly disappearing in the world.
Most of mangroves are here in Indonesia. But like in many other places, mangrove has been lost for about almost 50% in the last 40 years. So this remaining mangrove in Indonesia is about 3 million hectares. It's really very precious to conserve, and the remaining need to be restored.
Today, organizations around the world are working on the important task of planting millions of new mangroves along vulnerable coastlines. As was seen in Hambantota, natural ecosystems throughout the world can help to protect against extreme weather events and natural disasters. But when they're destroyed, we do so at our own peril. Sinkholes. Sudden.
Oh, it was a total disaster zone. It looked like a bomb went off.
Terrifying.
This building's coming down.
Deadly.
We lost everything.
When the earth opens, it can swallow cars, homes, even people.
All of a sudden, everything just went out like that.
Yet history reveals a side to the abyss we can't live without.
There is nothing to compare to the beauty of the cenotes in the Yucatan.
And as science unlocks a geological imperative, are humans to blame for a growing disaster? Hurricanes, tsunamis, earthquakes.
This was the deadliest tornado on record.
The impact can be devastating.
God completely wiped it off the map.
We step inside the disaster.
We were running for our lives.
It hits like a freight train.
And unravel the unexpected and sometimes jaw-dropping total impact.
Believe it or not, some good can come from these monster storms.
Below the Earth's surface, something sinister stirs. A monster lies in wait. A gaping hole growing under a hotel. But as guests come and go, no one is aware that it's about to rear its destructive, deadly head. Sisters Faith and Deborah, along with Faith's 2 sons, Grant and Liam, arrive in Florida for vacation. But things are a little off when they return to their favorite hotel.
The elevator was not working. And it was like there was a day it would work and then a couple of days where it wouldn't. And there was some cracking in the columns. It was a little inconvenient.
The sisters are unaware that these small inconveniences are actually clues. Warning signs to an impending disaster. For the family, the trip is a treat before the boys head back to school in the fall.
We had been to Florida several times and at this resort, so we knew the resort and we were there having a great time.
With more than a dozen theme parks, Orlando, Florida is one of the top tourist destinations in the world. Their resort is nearby in Claremont. With free shuttle service to the surrounding theme parks, it's the perfect place to relax and have fun. After 3 days at the parks, they decide to spend a day back at the resort. Put their feet up and unwind. But their relaxing is about to take a shocking turn.
I was taking a bath and the tub moved and the water splashed and Faith's yelling at me to get out of the tub. That's when I realized something was terribly wrong.
And I heard a boom. It sounded like a twisting sound. So I immediately ran over and called the front and said, "Did we just have an earthquake?" And the person laughed at me and said, "We don't have those here. You can go back to bed."
While Floridians are familiar with tropical storms and hurricanes, the state lies nowhere near a tectonic plate. In fact, Florida is tied with North Dakota for having the fewest earthquakes in the nation. But Faith is certain something is wrong.
I ran to the front door and opened the front door, and I could see that our walkway was splitting from the rest of the building. I called back down and I said, "You may have told me to go back to bed, but this building's coming down."
Faith and Deborah have no idea they've checked into a hotel atop a terrifying geological phenomenon that's causing devastation around the planet. A giant sinkhole.
The Florida geology is made up of limestone, primarily carbonate rock, which has a lot of perforations. It's almost like Rice Krispie. And so water flows freely through that, which makes it a very good aquifer. While the aquifer itself is a good source of drinking water, that whole geology causes some instability in the ground. When the water gets pushed through the rocks into this aquifer, it takes material with it, causing cavities to form on top. And those cavities grow eventually to become sinkholes.
The hotel creaks and groans as a dark void grows below, increasing in size until it's ready to swallow the hotel and everyone inside.
The feeling and the noise was definitely something that was not natural. The kids were starting to panic.
It was very scary. We saw that the walkway was coming away from the side of our building. I was lucky enough to grab keys in my wallet, and we were out. As we were going down the stairs, we're hollering, "You need to get out, you need to get out, the building's coming down." I mean, we were running for our lives, literally.
Once the family escapes the building, Faith runs for help.
I had started my shift at 11 o'clock, and I was on a golf cart doing my checks. And as I passed this building, a woman come running out of the building and told me that they had a problem in the building.
I ran for the security guard that was coming by on the golf cart. And I said, you need to come with me. This building's coming down." He kind of looked at me like I was crazy. And I literally pulled him off the golf cart and made him stand and listen and hear everything.
I could hear popping and cracking of the building. It sounded like gunshots. All I see is the building collapsing.
Despite the danger, Richard races inside to alert the guests.
I had started knocking on doors and trying to get people up and wake them up to get them out of the buildings. One room that I went to, there was a lady in there that had a baby in a crib, and I banged on the door. I told her, "Ma'am, you got to get out." No sooner did she pick that child up out of the crib, the back wall collapsed of her room. She just started screaming. I said, "Ma'am, please calm down. It'll be okay. But we need to get you out of here." The building, it was twisting almost like a licorice stick.
It sounded like almost a bomb went off because everything was exploding.
It was tilting, and then finally just broke off. It was collapsing. It was just amazing. It was like someone had just broken off a part of it and thrown it off to the side. I'm amazed that everyone made it out.
I think we were all in shock. And I remember going over and sitting on the curb with my hands on my head, and I'm sitting there wondering, what the heck just happened?
Within 45 minutes of the first cracking sounds, much of the 3-story building has collapsed into an 18-meter wide and almost 5-meter deep sinkhole. The extreme speed of the collapse points to a particularly dangerous type of sinkhole.
A cover collapse sinkhole is where the soil above the limestone forms an arch and prevents the visible signs on the surface. As the cavity grows, the arch collapses suddenly. The cover collapse sinkhole is the most dangerous type of sinkhole because it opens up dramatically and does not give much of a warning.
I was thanking God we were out. When we looked up, you could look right into our unit and see the room my sons were staying in.
The only thing that was left of that building was a stairwell and the rooms on the very outside edge of that building.
More than 100 guests escaped to safety, including Deborah, Faith, and the boys. But how did the structure manage to stay standing so long with the cavernous hole lurking beneath it?
Because of the way the structure was built, possible that the concrete slabs and so on gave you some time by bridging the sinkhole that was already there so that you had some time before the entire system started to collapse.
We lost everything.
We left with the most important things we came with.
Yes, our lives. You never think it's going to happen to you.
They say lightning doesn't strike twice, but still, I look around at everything when I go somewhere.
Faith has good reason to be concerned. Below Florida's idyllic landscape is a ticking time bomb. It's being called Sinkhole Alley.
Normally, you don't see the front sides of houses just all of a sudden, split up and go into the ground.
Faith and Deborah may have cheated death when their hotel crashed into a sinkhole. But their experience isn't entirely uncommon. Sinkholes are a terrifying worldwide phenomenon. And in Florida, they're happening with frightening regularity.
Just like any other day, it's about 7 o'clock. I'm starting to move out, and I go to put the keys in the truck, and something just doesn't look normal. So I glance to my left at the house across the street, and then immediately you know something's wrong.
That morning I woke up like any other morning, and I got an alert on my agency phone that said a crew was going out to the sinkhole, so that's not an uncommon alert to get. I went about my morning, and my phone kept alerting. After about the 5th alert, I saw the list of units that were going to a sinkhole call, which is usually just a 1-unit response. There was about 3 or 4 different engines going to this sinkhole alert.
As Sean heads out, Terrence has a front row seat to a shocking scene.
I'm looking at the house and I'm hearing noises, and the front left side of the house is no longer there. I kind of had an idea of what it might be, that this is most likely a sinkhole. We're in the wet season in July. We have a lot of rain, but normally, you don't see the front sides of houses just all of a sudden split up and go into the ground.
Heavy rains and hurricane season in Florida begin around June 1st, and their landfall is often tied with the sudden appearance of sinkholes.
Sinkholes happen more when you get more rainfall and you get more pressure of water from the surface, or if you have drought or very little rain, or if you pump the water away from that area where there's water. Those can open up cavities as well.
I ran back inside and asked my wife, I said, hey, you need to get out here. I said, I think Steve and Bonnie's house is going down. 911's been called, so you're starting to hear the fire trucks arrive.
When we got there, it was actively growing, and it was very loud. The earth falling into that hole and making loud splashes, the water bubbling up from the earth, making a lot of noise, almost like the water was boiling.
A wake would flow to the left, and then it would flow to the right, and it would take, every time it kind of moved back, it would take a little bit more of the land.
The interaction of water all around it was extremely dramatic, which means that it was moving, fluctuating, and had a lot of seasonal variations, which caused underground cavities to open up quite quickly.
The home starts dropping more and more and more. You start seeing it to approach the front door, and that goes down. At the same time, it's moving to the house at the left.
It was very shocking. Once we realized that hole was growing, we started to clear the roads. I've never been on an active sinkhole where it was still actively growing.
The fire department was familiar with sinkholes, but they'd never seen one swallow a house. And just 80 kilometers to the west, a hotel had collapsed into a sinkhole only a couple of years earlier. What on earth was happening? It turns out, Florida is ground zero for sinkholes in the US, and the region even has a name, Sinkhole Alley.
Sinkhole Alley is a known cluster of sinkholes that is in the central Florida area. Land O'Lakes is an area where there is a lake and connects to other cave structures underground. And then we had developed some housing on top of that. That area underground has a large number of cavities already documented. And they were extremely worried that those would all grow to either connect with each other or to reach the lake and the entire area, which would completely disappear.
The area becomes too dangerous, and residents are evacuated.
Then the sheriff and the emergency responders give us about 5 to 7 minutes to gather what we can and evacuate our home. And as we're doing this, the sinkhole's still moving and expanding. At that moment, you're in disbelief. The house that we just fixed up, that we love, our little dream home on the lake, doesn't look like it's going to be there in a few hours. I was extremely worried. The creaking, the splashing, and all that stuff is now elevated to full-blown, almost demolition of a house. You could almost picture equipment in there knocking things down.
As the house was sinking into the sinkhole, large parts of it were concrete, but the wood structure of the roof and a lot of their personal belongings were actually just floating on top of the water. Sofas and papers and bills, and there was a boat in the yard on a trailer. That whole thing sunk. We couldn't go in there and get any of that stuff because the hole was too turbulent and that hole was still growing. Watching their entire life just go into a hole in the earth, there's nothing you can do. We felt helpless.
Within a few hours, they had moved us from that spot to where we couldn't see it. That was tough. It's like, I can't believe this is happening to me and to us, and right here in little old Land O'Lakes, Florida.
Our fire chief was able to come out with his drone to help us determine what was going on, where this hole might be heading.
Unsatiated, the monster sinkhole goes on to consume a neighboring house and part of Terrence's property.
About 7 to 8 hours, it continuously grew. The final girth of the hole was, I believe, 260 feet across. It was deep enough to take 2 houses into it.
The next morning when you wake up, you say, was it all a dream? And you're like, okay, it wasn't a dream, because you look out and you see this disaster zone that's sitting right there. It looked like a bomb went off. Good thing that came out of the situation was no one died, no animals died.
If somebody would have been in one of those houses in Land O'Lakes when that sinkhole opened, that would have been a deadly sinkhole. I think we got very lucky that no one was home. When you see it in the news, you think, man, is that going to happen to me? It's a very scary thought.
Even scarier is when it does happen to you at night while you're in bed, sleeping.
The entire room was nothing but just an open, churning dirt pit.
When a massive sinkhole swallowed up homes in Terrence's neighborhood, it impacted their lives in unimaginable ways. But they were lucky. Not everyone is so fortunate.
Yeah, it really wasn't any different than any other day. I began at 7, answered calls throughout that evening, and I just finished that, and then that's when I got the 911 call. The call said that somebody had fallen through the floor of the house. The only thing that came into my mind was maybe somebody had fallen through maybe a rotten portion of the floor, or that maybe somebody had been doing, like a renovation. When I got onto Faithway Drive, it's a residential community. Just everybody was out in the road, like waving, flagging me down. They were hysterical. Going through the yard, the structure of the house, everything was perfectly normal. The lights were still on, the TV in the living room was still on, everything was normal. So when I get past the living room, started walking down the hallway, and you could hear almost like a grumbling noise. I don't really know how to explain it other than that. As I turned to go into that room, the entire room was nothing but just an open, churning, like dirt pit almost. The floor had completely just been ripped apart.
A sinkhole had opened up directly under the bedroom.
It is not unusual if portions of the house collapse. Sinkholes can be fairly local, and the slab itself may be giving some stability to the house. In this case, parts of the house collapse first, and then other parts sort of rotate and fall in. And so it's possible that the sinkhole in this case was either at an edge or closer to just that one room.
I remember seeing all this furniture just all over the place, but it was churning. Then I saw Jeremy. He was standing in the edge of the hole. The best way that I can explain what it looked like is if you think of like a funnel or an hourglass. The center is more or less the deepest part of that, and everything around it is caving in to that center. Jeremy at that moment was more or less climbing, if you will, trying to stay on top of the dirt that was falling in. I was thinking, I wonder if this is what a sinkhole is, because I had never experienced it. I said, hey man, we need to get you out of this.
Deputy Duvall was standing at the edge of a gaping and growing sinkhole, one that was ready to claim Jeremy Bush.
The sinkhole in Seffner was probably the most catastrophic type, where there were no signs at all that there was a collapse imminent. It happened very, very quickly. It is probably the most extreme example of a cover collapse sinkhole.
With Jeremy desperately trying to escape the clutches of the churning pit of debris, Deputy Duvall has no time to spare.
He looked up and he saw me. He reached up, and I laid down on the ground, The floor was like almost like a diving board, how flimsy it was because everything had been ripped away from that bedroom portion. I didn't realize the danger of the situation until I was down on my stomach with that diving board feeling, thinking I could end up in this hole really easy. I reached down, I somehow got his hands and just pulled. And next thing I know, Jeremy's out.
Though Jeremy is safe, the full horror of the situation becomes clear.
He said that his brother was still in there. There was nothing other than furniture that I saw. And he had this rumbling noise going on. And as soon as I had actually gotten myself in the motion of getting up and I was looking for his brother, all of a sudden everything just went out, like under the house. Everything that was there had started to fall into the hole.
Jeremy quickly recounts what happened to his 37-year-old brother, Jeffrey.
He said that his brother had gone to bed, everybody's sitting around watching TV, and when it all happened, he said it was a very loud, like, bang, and then that grumbling noise, and he heard his brother yell for him to help. He walked into a big hole in the room. He heard his brother yelling, help, so he just jumped in the hole thinking that he would be able to find him. It was just like that.
Within minutes of Deputy Duvall pulling Jeremy out of the sinkhole, emergency services arrive on the scene.
They put these listening devices in. It was gone. Just basically took it from them. So they made the decision that, that same thing could happen to a human and you couldn't rightfully lower another human in there.
Authorities decide it's too dangerous to attempt to rescue Jeffrey Bush. The family is heartbroken.
They made the choice to take the house down. Then they filled the sinkhole up about a week later. The other houses next to it, they had to vacate those houses and they tore those down as well because of how large the hole was. The county had put up a fence around it just to keep people out of the area. And then they put some shrubs and plants around it just to make it look a little bit nicer. They actually have like a plaque there also. It's like an in memory type thing.
The tragedy will stay with Deputy Duvall and the residents of Seffner for the rest of their lives, as the fear of another possible sinkhole lurks around every corner.
You don't have a warning system for a hole just dropping out and underneath you. I don't think people really understood that until this sinkhole happened, how real of a possibility it is.
Sinkholes are a terrifying global phenomenon, swallowing 30-meter trees in Louisiana, devouring a 3-story factory in Guatemala, and collapsing a 100-meter wide hole in a street in Indonesia. And yet, there's more than meets the eye, as scientists uncover the total impact of sinkholes, their life-giving properties, and their deadly mysteries.
The Mayans were inspired by the beauty. That's one of the reasons why they revered.
Sudden, catastrophic, horrifying. Sinkholes are a deadly part of the Earth's geological makeup. Yet when an asteroid hurtled into the planet 66 million years ago, ending the age of dinosaurs, the impact produced one of the most breathtaking examples of sinkholes in the world. Today, the remnants of the crater form what's known as the Ring of Cenotes,
The ring has a 180 kilometers diameter, so it's just semicircular part that is along which the cenotes are forming.
After the initial collapse of a sinkhole, when the remaining hole exposes groundwater, it's known as a cenote in the Yucatan.
The water comes from cenote, which in Mayan means place where you can get access to water.
At least 900 sinkholes make up the ring of cenotes, yet these are only a fraction of the staggering 6,000 sinkholes estimated in the Yucatan. Together, they make up part of the largest underwater cave system in the world.
Most of the time, you will have several cenotes that are very close one to each other, and they are connected by underwater passages. So there's like a long, big cave in which you can enter in several points through these cenotes. And as a matter of fact, in the Yucatan is the largest cave in the world, which is now over 370 kilometers.
The cenotes are unique because they have unbelievable formations, stalactites, stalagmites, columns, endless tunnels. They have beautiful, crystal clear water. It's just beautiful.
But with dead ends, narrow passageways, no light, and no obvious way to the surface, their beauty can be deceptive and deadly.
The cenotes or cave diving is dangerous is because people don't have emergency access to the surface. When you travel in a cave, you use the cenote as an entrance and then you travel inside. So if you have any problems, you can't just go up. You need to come back all the way to the entrance and surface.
Explorations of these unique ecosystems reveal species found nowhere else on Earth.
Endemic species are there, blind fishes, and there is a blind swamp eel.
The cenote is a capsule of time. You can find fossil of shells, corals, animal bones. They also found prehistoric fishes.
They also offer a glimpse into the mysterious world of the Mayans, who believed these sinkholes were passageways to the underworld.
If you dive, you will find artifacts, ceramics, tools, and of course skeletons from the Mayan times. They will go and pray to have more wet and rains. Would do sacrifices and throw animals to the gods of rain and stuff like that, and humans.
The Mayans' sacrificial reverence for cenotes came from their ability to produce fresh water.
In the Yucatan Peninsula is the only source of water, of fresh water, so it's vital for the human life.
Having access to cenotes, to the water in the cenotes, it was crucial from early times. And so both Maya and present-day people in Yucatan are using this.
Today, conservation of the cenotes is critical to life in the Yucatan.
It is important to preserve and protect cenotes because they are both a cultural and an environmental heritage for the people of the world.
So it's very important for the ecosystem. The cenotes help to filter all the rainwater before it arrives to the ocean, to the coral reef. So it's a process that they need to go from the cenote through the mangrove and then to the coral reef.
The balance is very, very delicate.
Those sinkholes have made the Yucatan livable for thousands of years. Over 12,000 kilometers away, the fastest growing rate of sinkholes in the world threatens the Dead Sea in Israel.
The rate of recession, we should all be worried about it.
Sinkholes can appear anywhere, a deadly consequence of the geological imperative of the Earth. Around the Dead Sea in Israel, they become a minefield of destruction.
The first sinkhole in the Dead Sea area was reported in the late 1980s. So if you look at aerial footage before 1980, there were no sinkholes in that area. Now, we have almost 6,000 sinkholes, and they're growing alarmingly. In fact, they're the fastest growing rate of sinkholes in the world.
But why would sinkholes suddenly be appearing after thousands of years of stability? In places like Florida and Mexico, sinkholes occur due to the geological makeup of the landscape. The surrounding limestone is permeable and dissolves relatively easily in water. But this isn't the geological makeup around the Dead Sea. It turns out part of the answer lies in its most abundant resource, salt.
The Dead Sea is 10 times saltier than any other ocean.
Because it's a very, very dry area. It doesn't get much fresh water flowing into it. And it's an old feature, so over time, a lot of water was evaporated from that sea, meaning that it got saltier and saltier and saltier. The sinkholes in the Dead Sea are unique because they're actually forming in a very soluble rock, but it's not limestone, it's actually salt. And as we all know, salt dissolves very, very, very quickly.
But why would the salt be dissolving and creating thousands of sinkholes now? It turns out the Dead Sea is dying. The sea itself has been rapidly shrinking for decades, largely due to the commercial diversion of 95% of the Jordan River's water.
The combined population of that area of the Middle East has quadrupled, which is causing more pressure on the water supply.
In a desert region with little rain, this cuts off the Dead Sea's main source of water.
The water has receded around 1.5 kilometers since the 1960s, and it's only around a third of the size that it used to be.
Like in Florida, where abundant rain can dissolve limestone, creating sinkholes. Around the Dead Sea, rainfall dissolves salt.
The rock there, when the sea was covering it, were full of salt, and when the water receded, these pockets of salt are now encountering fresh water from rain or surface runoff, and that fresh water is dissolving the salt, creating these pockets of openings and areas where sinkholes are forming. There are three primary causes for the formation of sinkholes in the Dead Sea area. The increase in population, there's also a higher demand for water, and there is a reduction in precipitation, about 10% due to climate change.
The growing threat is swallowing roads, destroying buildings, and closing businesses. Entire areas have been closed off due to the threat.
The number of sinkholes is increasing so quickly in this region. Obviously, houses or roads or industry that's built in that area is going to be under threat. Also, with these sinkholes, that may allow pollution from these cities, towns to go down into the water that they use for their drinking water.
The cumulative effect has been a devastating blow to nature in the region.
The lowering of the water in the Dead Sea is causing a lot of damage to the ecosystem there, particularly to the birds. The rate of recession of the Dead Sea is alarmingly high, and we should all be worried about it. As a heritage of the world, we should care about why we are lowering the water levels so much.
If nothing changes, the projections are clear.
The level of the Dead Sea is declining at the rate of 3 feet per year. And by the year 2050, the entire sea will have dried up. It is quite alarming that we will completely have lost the Dead Sea.
As these silent killers continue to appear around the world, both new technologies and ancient techniques are being used to combat the problem.
All the good ground in Florida has already been built upon. So we're left with stuff that is unstable.
Sinkholes, swallowing homes, businesses, and even people. Around the world, these deadly and unpredictable disasters are on the rise. But in an increasingly populated world, is there anything that can be done? Jay is a geotechnical construction specialist and has spent almost 20 years working in sinkhole-prone areas in Florida.
What makes sinkholes so dangerous and costly is they're very unpredictable. You have to look at the geology. In simple terms, relate it similar to Swiss cheese. So you have all these different natural holes and depressions, and over time, rain is slightly acidic, and it can slowly erode that limestone layer down at the bottom.
Geologically, these areas are known as karst, regions around the world that are underlain with soluble rocks like limestone. Like Florida and the Yucatan, they're often characterized by underground drainage systems, and when it rains, can become riddled with sinkholes. When sinkholes appear in heavily populated areas, the results can be costly and catastrophic. In 2014, a sinkhole collapsed the showroom floor of the National Corvette Museum in Kentucky, plunging 8 classic cars into a 9-meter deep pit. After extracting the cars, it took a year and a half, $3.2 million US, and almost 4,000 tons of rock to fill and repair the hole. The safe restoration of the site also included the use of piles, an ancient technique used in areas with unstable ground around the world.
Micropiles, underpinning, push piers. In essence, they're inserted in the ground to support the foundation. Similar to putting the helm on underground stilts. You're going all the way around the perimeter, and the home is held up by those underpiles.
But can anything be done to prevent sinkholes and protect structures before they appear?
We lowered down cameras.
Modern technology may hold the key.
The only way to truly know what's going on is to use testing methods and do ground penetrating radar to look for anomalies or voids in the soil.
The radar detects any voids, cracks, and other conditions that could lead to sinkholes. If the ground appears weak, engineers can create reinforcements.
A big part of our business is actually pre-treating the ground prior to the foundation being laid. We will do a ground improvement technique called vibro stone columns, where we're inserting a large vibro float down about 20-25 feet into the ground, and there's a stone tube where that stone falls down into the bottom, and the tool is worked up and down, basically building a stone column that takes a very loose soil site and increases the load-bearing strength up to an acceptable building strength where the building is not going to settle down under its own weight. Vibro in itself will trigger any problem sinkholes that are on the site, and then we can just fill them with stone and address them at that time before building. So the most common methods that engineers do recommend is, number 1 is compaction grouting. Number 2 would be underpinning, and number 3 would be chemical grout. Compaction grouting is pumping concrete under high pressure into the ground to fill voids and densify soil. That's going to seal the limestone layer. That's like Swiss cheese, protect it. The chemical grout is done under a low pressure, and we can safely do that all the way up to the surface. And it's designed to densify all the upper soils. So you're basically sealing that, protecting it.
Jay has found the best protection is early detection.
The faster you can identify a problem in the beginning, the less money it is to address it and fix it before it becomes a major issue. The future of sinkholes in Florida, they're going to continue to be prevalent. The big positive is we've figured out how to address these and fix them. It's just one of those prices to pay, I would say, to live in this beautiful tourist destination.
As the world's population grows and development strains the landscape, the threat of sinkholes continues to rise.
You have to be very careful in how you plan urban development. Population growth, more demand for water, and construction due to urbanization can result in the increase of sinkholes occurring.
Without changes, the future seems inevitable.
Obviously, there's going to be some impact when it comes to how much the Earth can support before something like this happens again.
Sinkholes, terrifying acts of nature that can swallow the world in the blink of an eye. Science shows that human development has been creating them at alarming rates. Yet their total impact reveals both life-giving water and an extraordinary glimpse into ancient worlds. And while building techniques can help slow their deadly march, we might take a nod from the Mayans' reverence and look toward protecting the lands from which these deadly acts of nature spring.